Okay, so as I promised in my previous tier list video, the DZBT04 tier list is here. And I'll be honest, this is a very easy meta to kind of look into because of the power creep is very obvious, while most of the top deck are more or less the same, with a few old piles has been gaining a lot of attention. And of course, shit ton of strike deck set. Like holy shit, even in my locals, everyone's using strike.
No, God!
I am not gonna lie, this is not gonna be fun for me to farm for those glorious 2 brand new PRs right now. But how good are some of the decks that are still on the list right now and the new entries that did receive a significant support? So if you are here for the first time, welcome. I normally do tier list video and my first impression on each of the deck. I feel a lot of people misunderstood that, so let me get it out first.
Sure. Bunghole, continue.
Anyway, I normally use these 3 particular rules to actually judge each entry as much as I can for every tier list. And for those who are here for a long time, you kind of familiar with it, but just to reiterate for the new viewers, first, no collab nation. For me, I am not exactly that confident in covering each of the collab nation because I am not familiar with them at all. I normally don't encounter that many players who do play the collab decks, so my knowledge on these are really small. I'm fully aware that there are people who are asking me about the collab nation, which I have to wonder, can you guys understand English?
Am I a joke to you?
Joking aside, maybe I will leave a pinned comment in the comment section later on and see whether how many people are actually excited or wanted me to do an actual collab nations tier list in a separate video. Okay, if we can get it to 500 likes, I will make it. Like seriously, I feel like to cover this topic, it's gonna need a lot of effort. So subscribe, leave a like if you want to see this tier list video. Anyway, off rail a little bit, but back to the second rules, and that is limited entry. So I normally put only 3 entry into S tier and 10 entry into A plus tier. This is just to kind of split what I consider to be a great deck to be used in the competition and a good deck that is a good rogue tier that can be used in the competition but need a little bit of luck to get a good result in those tournaments as well. And last but not least, this is based on my experience, and by the time I recorded this, only a few WGP has been held, so not a lot of results coming out yet, but I feel this time around, experiencing this current meta is enough for me to know how I feel about the current state of the DZBT04 and the strike deck set meta right now. So yeah, that is pretty much the ground rules that has been laid. So without further ado, let's start off with the re-ranking, because I feel last time was a little bit too messy for me to adjust the entry that's already inside because of that reason. So let's be organized this time. Okay, editing mechanic here, and I decided to make this particular interruption here before we get into the actual tier list because I decided to use the old recording intro instead of making a new one, purely because it was almost perfect except for a few things. I decided to include ban lists and a first skyride promo in the consideration of this video. So if there are some entry that you feel is a little bit too high, that is the reason why. I know it's gonna be mostly affected the dark state entries, but yeah, just to point it out first, because I expect this video to be dropped like maybe slightly after DZBT05 or something. So the more you know, I guess. And of course, we have to start off with the very top because there's only one deck, and after terrorizing Vanguard tops for a really long time, I personally feel Shiranui finally dropped off to A plus tier.
It's too much winning!
He doesn't drop off as hard as I thought it would because he still more or less play against all the decks in the format really well. He still maintained that 7 attack deck moniker that he does have. It's just that his number is not as good as it used to be thanks to the restriction of full right.
Nice.
Because of that, the deck plays slightly better against the deck that does goes hard on turn 3, turn 4 like that, but does play worse against a deck that does stall for a long while. You know what deck I'm talking about right here. Okay, so now that we move the S tier out, time to talk about A plus tier, and there are 4 different decks I feel that has lost its momentum in DZBT04. The first one is obviously Benny, who lost the momentum down all the way to high A tier. The reason reason behind this drop is because of the fact that the deck is still Baromagnes even if it is properly redefined Baromagnes.
Everywhere I go, I see his face.
No. No!
The deck still need a little bit of high roll to get into the final power gear, and the power deduction, because of the fact that it deduct at the start, it means that if your opponent get any defensive later on, you are screwed. So there are still elements in this deck that can get screwed over by just the flow of the Vanguard game, and hence I'm dropping her to high A tier. I still think it is a really good deck, but it just too high rolly for me, at least.
You were so close to perfect.
And then we have Jet.
Why?
Okay, I decided to talk about Jet first because this is an entry that people might find it controversial. I personally still think Jet is strong.
A bold claim.
Considering the Skyride PR. Jet draw engine has always been one of the most ridiculous draw engine any deck can have, maybe beaten by another strike deck. But the point here is that now that the deck has another piece of their puzzle to the early game draw, it can get really strong. However, the deck does have a little bit of issue, and that is the fact that it is generally quite hard to pull off the first turn strike properly, based on one of the best Jet player that I know of, Wilson on Twitter, mentioned it to me. But in general, I think the deck is still very strong because it can roll off very early game, very early on, and does end the game very well. And it does have a decent matchup against some of the best deck in the format right now. So I would say Jet still maintained his positioning, but not Messiah.
Emotional damage!
Which does got his rank down to high A tier as well, above Benny. The point that I mentioned about Messiah in my previous tier list about Lyle being a really instant support for him doesn't change that much. I would say what kind of make him lose momentum here is the same issue that he has, and the reason why I didn't think too fondly of Messiah from the start, and that is the fact that you have to strike to get the benefit. And this is not just about getting a lock card, it is just about essentially everything. If Messiah cannot lock or use his unlock skill, the deck seems to lose a lot of momentum. So against a deck that has a lot of control or so many attacks that even if his big hand side cannot handle, can get overwhelmed very easily. Especially he is weak before first strike, which is where some of the best deck in the format right now excel as well. And the same can be said for Archive. Archive take a little bit of time to really get into gears because of all the setup that you need to use with her deck. But overall, I do still think she is, I would say, the worst victim to be dropped off A+ tier because DZBT04 just brings so many decks into the meta. So because of that, I'm gonna drop her down to mid A tier behind Coro. I still think the Archive Rush is still okay. It's just that you need to make sure that your Torrential Research hits all the right cards as you play every turn, and you also have to pray that you get the last 2 copy organically as well. Or you just use Texian, which is a solution as well.
Just saying.
And then we have Kyoka. I'll say this first. In the format that you are not considering anything but Lyrical decks, aka Lyrical Cup, Kyoka definitely is one of the best deck in the format, standing beside another deck that I'll shift it up shortly, and a new blood that will enter the tier list. So overall, I will put Kyoka like here. Like in consideration as one of the best Lyrical deck, I have to put her this high. Her ability to get to 5 attack easily is really insane, on top of the fact that you can fetch PG very easily every turn, which is something a certain top deck just lost recently, is a really huge deal. And also the reason why she was able to top before the certain cat girl breaks in. But I would say if you're considering everything else, she played very poorly against the top 13 deck I'll be putting later on. And it's not really her fault per se, it's just that she doesn't push hard enough on the turn where she can push the opponent, and at the same time her survivability is strong but not strong enough to handle a deck that can go off rushing on turn 3 or first strike or something like that. Okay, now that we have shifted the deck from A+ tier down, let's move a deck that is in the A tier into the A+ tier. And there is 2 entries I'm thinking of to bring it up, and that is the queen of Lyrical Cup at the moment, BANCHOU. BANCHOU is one of those decks where you need to drive check well to win because of the fact that the deck doesn't really gain critical whatsoever, so you have to rely on that in that aspect. But everything else about her deck is insane. The deck that has 3 drive check units and can hit ridiculous number upwards of 40 to 60k consistently, it's just simply way too insane for me. So I decided to put her at the low A+ tier because she is definitely have time to shine, even though I feel one particular deck just kind of put the dampen on her as well. Another deck I want to bring it up just purely because of the fact that it is a perfect counter to a lot of deck in the current format is Dayusha. Dayusha goes so well regardless of whether you're going first or second, to an extent that it is able to push your opponent that does have a little bit of slow build up for the win. The deck has all the filters that any deck could have won for, has a board building skill that is actually pretty damn solid, and to top it off, it just feels so, I wouldn't call it fun to play, but I would say feels so safe to play Dayusha. But the only problem I have with him at the moment is the numbers.
Hey yo, what the f—
The fact that he have pseudo divine skill with this just feels a little bit too weird, and I hope that the future support will fix that issue for him, especially if those support are durables. That is pretty much the entry that I want to bring from A tier to A+ tier, and then we have a few entry that I feel need some adjustment in A tier itself, and that is Chaos. I'll bring Chaos down to a little bit in the middle, like maybe behind Claudine, purely because both of the decks has similar entry point. You need to high roll to win. Like Claudine is a disgusting deck, and with the recent support with the Garlic, I think the Plant Token will be an engine that might top the format in BT05 or even DBT06 since we're getting Rorowa support after that. But I do feel these two decks require a little bit of high rolling, which does make it a little bit too inconsistent if you're playing like 9-10 matches in a single day. So because of that, I have to lift him down, and to be fair, I would say Rorowa does suffer as well, so I'll bring him down to mid A tier. Same reason, nothing too crazy to talk about, that's pretty much it. And there's a last group of cards I have to talk about, and that is the decks in low A tier. I personally do feel from Silhouette all the way down to Howlrisker has to be shifted down, so something like this.
A few moments later.
Yep, that's pretty much the shifting. I mean, Ganewa is pretty okay, especially considering the DBT05 support, so I'm just gonna leave him there for now. But yeah, these are the few entries that I want to shift down to B tier.
Why?
These decks are holded back by one or more of these 3 problems. For one, the defense is so weak that it cannot handle against a ridiculously high number of attacks that we have been dealing with ever since the start of DZBT04. Secondly, the deck has a really bad profit for the amount of input you have to put in. Or 3, just way too RNG for it to be consistent. And that is pretty much from the low A tier to B tier. And then we have the B tier decks that are getting promoted to A tier, and there's only one entry, and that's Yotsuba into, I would say, low A tier. Yes, that's feel right with her in low A tier. The reason I'm bringing this up is because one of my friends did mention Yotsuba is one of those decks where it has an extremely high skill ceiling, where you need to get used to not seeing your opponent damage more than like 1 or 2 counter blasts. If you can get used to that, the deck just pops off. It's one of the best style deck in the game with a way to guarantee winning. Something another defensive deck doesn't really have, but I'll talk into it more as I reach to his entry. But yeah, Yotsuba has always been my best girl among the 5, so seeing her still have relevancy after all this time does bring some joy to my heart.
Shut up, simp.
And then we have the C tier. There are one deck I want to shift it down purely because its number is so horrible that even the joke magazine boss in it works better than him right now. Fafnir. Like, yes, he does have a consistent restand and does get additional power and crit, but I feel like the problem with Fafnir ultimately is just simply the fact that, similar to Lutetia in the past, in a sense that it's so selfish to himself that it affects the whole game plan overall. But fortunately enough for Fafnir, and of course with the Grace as well, they are getting a new update form, so let's pray those forms are good for those 2 decks. But that would be at least 1-2 tier list afterwards.
Why you pouring me? I'm right.
And that is pretty much all the readjustment I'm planning to do for this tier list. And now time to talk about a brand new supports, a brand new deck, and of course the PR supports. But before that, give me a sec to adjust and I'll be back shortly.
One eternity later.
Okay, I have rearranged the deck I want to talk in order, so let's start off with the deck I forgot to mention in previous tier list, Kyrie. Kyrie, okay, I know people talking about it, but Kyrie is just running Lyrical Power, the order Lyrical Power in specific, and just use Ballista. So yes, the deck sees some winning result, but it's so short-lived that I can't put it any higher than high A behind Prison. Like, that is all I can talk about it, and I cannot talk anything much because Kyrie did not really getting any significant support during the Divine's Lyrical Booster 1. So there's not much to talk about Kyrie other than the fact that I'm sorry I forgot to talk about it last tier list, but even if considering last tier list, I was still shifting Kyrie a little bit up to high A tier, and that's about it. So it did not change my opinion too much ever since people reminded me about Kyrie. Now time to enter the newest entry properly, and we have something that I feel I neglect talking for a long while, the start decks. The scummy business practice behind the start deck is a topic for another day, but regardless, the support that they have been receiving recently are actually pretty damn solid and fix some of the issue that the certain deck has in certain aspect. However, I do feel one of those decks that did not get the memo is Triumph Dragon, the Dragon Empire start deck, where I do not think he gets any improvement or deprovement from the support that he has been receiving, so I'm gonna leave him where he was in the past, just right behind Grand Fear. The reason why I'm saying this is because his new support doesn't really help him that much. The only thing that the Lava Flow Dragon does fix for him is just not getting a draw one from Straff Command Dragon, which is I feel the least of the problem the deck has. If the deck has a way to reuse Straff Command consistently, then I would say yeah, that's really good. But the thing is the deck doesn't have one right now, so I would have to consider Triumph Dragon no improvement. Especially you considering Osella Jess got a huge improvement. The new PR support that he received is an insane card that tuned extremely well into Osella Jess as a deck. Yes, even more so than the Coro Coro boss that we received. The reason behind all this is because of how strong that state is at recycling that soul. You see, the grade 1 PR helps you to put the Tilikan, the pairing grade 3, into soul, which does trigger Tilikan's draw skill, and the PR helps you to recover just enough soul to trigger Tilikan's skill. And not only that, this is not hard once per turn. So this means that if you have another copy of the PR in another column, you can just use Osella Jess skill to call the Tilikan that you put in the first attack out into the same column as that PR, and you have another attack that can essentially give
2 additional cards.
Osella Jess, in my opinion, gets shift up to mid A tier above Minerva. Like I said just now, the deck draws so much better, the deck cycles so much better, and the deck has a bit filter thanks to Osella Jess skill. And there are cards that does work very well with this deck that allow you to essentially pull off a high number count all the time as well. So I will say this now, there's no result about it yet, but if you guys see me doing decently with this, don't be surprised. And then we have Astum, and Astum is already getting a lot of bashing for me to be in the C tier, but I personally feel it deserves more than that. Oh, and also I noticed the Rotovisor is in the wrong order here.
Who cares?
So I'm gonna put Astum, personally for me, in D tier. The deck just rely way too much on Petriosa at the moment, and the new support does makes getting it easier, but it doesn't really make it stronger because it still maintains 4 attack. The power is more or less the same amount.
They only got one job.
So I feel like what would fix the deck now is another Petriosa, like a copy of it, something that is considered as a Petriosa in drop or deck or something, then I would consider it to be a better deck. And then we have Sarep Sile, and I would say Sarep Sile is one of those start deck that benefit from the PR support in a way because of the fact that with the new support, it allows you to more or less recycle Virile Dragon every turn. Essentially means that you're filtering at least 1 card every single turn, even if you're gonna use more counterblast.
Are you fucking dumb?
And because of that element and the less reliant on counterblast usage and the fact that you can hit at a better number now, I'm gonna put Sarif Sayo a bit higher, above Flagberg at the moment. All these decks are roughly in the same tier. Like, need a little bit of high roll to get things done, and once it goes off, it just goes off. I feel Sarif Sayo is one of those decks. Like, you need a right superior core target in your drop to really shine properly, but I feel like the deck is just a mess right now. It's trying to be like a Resayo, but at the same time, it doesn't do a good job at being a Resayo. There is a little bit of conflict there, but it is still
Decent.
deck to start. And then we have Cristianos. I would say one of the improved one among the 6, and I would consider him to be high B, like about here. Yeah, he's still not beat Glass yet, but he definitely beats Liquid.
Emotional damage!
The problem in the past is that he mill a lot, so he lose a lot of triggers along the way. But thanks to his new support, you can return more cards into deck kit. And he also has the most consistent way of returning Cristianos back to deck, thanks to the very same PR as well. There's nothing much to talk about him. He just works, but he is one of those high roll deck as well, so he do rely on some staples to make it works. Particularly Philander that is currently costing $50-$60. And then we have Marlene. Marlene is the most interesting one to judge because it fixed the main issue of the deck where Respino gives you free draw every time you bounce her, and she does help you to get that cost removed. So essentially, in that sense, you technically get a slightly weaker version of Oselages. So with all these elements combined, I will upgrade Marlene from high B tier into low A tier, purely because of the fact that the draw power is better, even though you need to pull all the cards out first. A bit similar to Oselages, but Oselages take advantage of that way better. And then we have the joke alternate start deck.
Bosses.
And it's safe to say this now, Dekakung was stronger than Sarif Sayo when he was released, but I think with the new support that does lift Sarif Sayo up more, Dekakung start to see more problem, especially the fact that he also needs Energy Blast just like Sarif Sayo, but the Energy Blast cost is no longer a problem for the original start deck, so Dekakung got dropped down to C tier. And the funny part is that he might get an additional support in the coming collab booster, but for now I would say I'll keep my finger crossed on this deck for now. And then we have the joke deck that is quite busted, Black. So Black is gonna get, and I think this is the first time a Coro Coro joke boss deck gets a shift here. Yes, this is one of the better Velstra deck in the format, and I would say the strongest form of Velstra in the format, just simply because of the fact that he shares both name of Astrum and Velstra, meaning that he have an access to both of their toolbox, which means that the deck can consistently go 6 attack, can do restand and multiple attack.
It's too much winning.
It is a best power of Astrum and Velstra together, and that's why Black deserves to be on A+ tier list. And before we continue, I'm gonna shift Luat down just a little bit. Yep, that feels right. And then we have
Whatever this thing is. Brother,
Bebe, yes, that's the name, is an interesting entry, at least for me, because it is definitely something that not a lot of people played, but I would say at the current stand, as someone who haven't played it but just look through the skill, he's about the same as Cristianos. Like, the main thing about this Babu guy is that he's essentially Lascaria and Cristianos mixed together and have, you know, a literal baby, where this card does gain more benefit the more Blitz order you have in your drop, while also allow you to mill a card from your deck to drop every single turn, and at the same time you also can more or less gain the same amount of board recovery as Cristianos. However, I do feel Bebe does lack a little bit of flexibility, something I feel Cristianos do has. And on top of that, I value Cristianos' ability to self-search for a personal right better than ability to get additional triple drive. Something that I feel, aside from Black who has a solution, every other Coro Coro boss unit does suffer from this issue. But that's just me, nothing too much to talk about here, but we have to wait and see if the Coro Coro booster will give these Coro Coro decks a proper update. And that is pretty much it for the start deck and the alike. But now, time to shift gear into S tier as Shojoroji, despite getting a ban list, is still an S tier deck for me. I mean, the point of ban list for Shojoroji is to reduce the consistency of the deck, and I feel it is effective enough, but not really, because the deck already have 4 cards that help you to compress the deck to begin with. So
genuinely disgusting.
Losing the most consistent form of filter doesn't really affect it as much as you think it is. Especially you have a perfect card to replace 3 open slots that is opened up after Isasao restriction, and that is a brand new PR, which help you to bind cards from soul, making you have even more option and even more defensive option to actually call defensively. And I feel like this PR was a clue that Bushiroad will be hitting Isasao, because its second skill does replace Isasao, but not completely. So yeah, if you're looking for Shojoroji to be completely out of the meta, I'm sorry, it's gonna stuck for a little bit longer. And then we have Gryandra, the deck that I personally still feel is very fun to play because of the concept, but unfortunately, even while still in B tier, I have to shift him down further behind Modalian. The reason behind all this is because of the fact that yes, the deck did get a guard restrict, but the power of the deck is
a little too high to need this type of pressure.
And on top of that, the hand size is weak. While the deck doesn't really have a good kind of pressure, yes, guard restrict is a kind of a pressure, but it is not good enough compared to things like drive check that we see in decks like BANCHOU or even Modalian. So because of that, I have to shift him down just a little bit, and the same unfortunate fate has to be applied to Omina Grigio as well.
It's not fair!
I still feel the shield minusing is still a valuable aspect of the deck, but I do feel that like Omina Grigio has consistent issue of fake hand. By that I mean
Vanguard はグレード3に始まりグレード3にて終わる。
You have way too many grade 3 in your hand because of all the search of the grade 3s that you're capable of doing so. And there is an interesting trend, I'm not sure it's intentional or not, with the way Bushiroad handling the Dark State support. All my favorite decks tend to get shoved after one good support. Like ever since Plutonic Prospector, we did not get anything good for Omina at all. And by that I mean a unit specific support that is good. And all Omina Grigio needs, in my personal opinion, it's just a counter charge. Doesn't need it to be a spammable kind of counter charge. Just once per turn counter charge is good enough for the deck already. But what we get? Well, we get another card that gives you free draw.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Yes, it does fix some fake hand issue that I mentioned earlier, but here's the thing, you don't need it. What a waste of Daisuke Izuka art, and what a waste of a double art slot. But I do think the deck is still stronger than decks like Emma and Minerva. Yeah, I feel a fucking start deck is currently better than Omina. That's how bad the support is for the deck right now. And before anyone in the comments say anything, no, Purple Cat is not enough counter charge, as the cost he asks for is not compatible with some deck, and I would say Mars is one of those groups.
So, I believe I made myself clear.
But you guys want to know something? Even with not getting counter charger for Omega Grisho, couldn't beat this rage I have for Bushiroad when they decided to desecrate one of my favorite deck of all time in Overdress format. And that deck is obviously Baromagnes.
I don't even know who you are.
It will no longer go any higher than C tier, top of C tier. The reason behind this is because Bushiroad decided to rework Baromagnes in the worst way possible. Providence Disorder Baromagnes is technically an upgrade, but here's the thing. Hitting 15 soul in Baromagnes is already tough, considering you have to vomit all your hand resource to reach that point, and that's not even consistent enough. Now you have to hit 20 soul. This is ridiculous. And to make things worse, they did not make that 20 or more soul skill worth the investment. Yes, it is a guard restrict, but I feel like with the amount of commitment you have to pull off for this particular skill, I want a proper reward for it, not this bullshit. Like, yes, you can, like me, make some funky build with Ready Rock or something, but I feel like the deck had just way too many problems, and this is where all the shit support I've been giving Baro for years start to pile up and start to become malignant towards Baro as a deck. So yeah, Baromagnes will forever, in my opinion, be the king of about to be mid deck, and it will not move off from there anymore unless the support is so good that it bring him up to even B tier. Prove me wrong, Bushiroad. Prove me wrong.
But wait!
Next up we have Rajevel. Finally, we got a chance to talk about something good, starting off with Bushiroad's favorite peach mountain, Bruce. And in this situation, I'm gonna be considering both Violent Bruce and Vehement Boost, in a sense that they get two great pieces to their support, namely Orlin and Ellie. I already gushed about how strong Ellie really is, but I haven't talked much about Orlin, who essentially enable two more attacks, as long as you have Julian.
Of course!
This essentially turns Violent Bruce into a very powerful 8 attack deck. Yes, the +2 attack doesn't really matter much, but if you're considering the playstyle of Final Rush, which is essentially turn 4 OTK, this makes a lot of difference. And it makes enough difference for him to get a promotion above Overlord. Both are turn 4 decks that does burst well, but Bruce has a lot more toolboxes to actually finish your opponent right then and there. The same goes for Final Burst, which unfortunately did not get as much of an improvement. I would still put him like above Final Rush decks because of the fact that Vehemence is still faster than Violence, and that is all thanks to Vehemence ability to still get Final Rush earlier compared to Violence. And purely because of that, Vehemence is slightly better than Violence, so I'm gonna put him in front of Violence. I mean, getting your toolbox one turn earlier just make a whole lot more difference. Even if there are more cards that play with Bruce that doesn't heavily rely on Final Rush as much anymore, namely of course Orlin and Ellie. Overall, I'm not surprised to see Bruce delegate themselves into a pure combo aggro deck because of, you know, its inspiration and what clan they kind of representing. And I can safely say this, Bruce is definitely one of dark horse if you are not prepared for the deck. Like, by the time I recorded this, I remember I saw a Bruce top 4 in one of the WGP. I'll put the fuzzy top image up somewhere. Thank you all Lost and Saviors. And yeah, it just proved Bruce Rush is heavily effective. The only drawback, defensive triggers, and the fact that it is a combo aggro, so you still need a lot of pieces to get all of this engine in gear. And then we have Dire Feudals, which I'm gonna put Dire Feudal in the same tier as Yotsuba, low A tier. Like, the PR helps one of the issues that has been plaguing for some time, and that is the deck search capability. And now that the deck has a way to search, it makes the consistency of the deck a lot better. But it is not a complete puzzle piece yet, as we do get a counter charger in DZBT05, but I'm not considering that yet. But yeah, Dire Feudal has been getting, I would say, pretty good support, but doesn't really solve the main issue of the deck yet. And that is the fact that the meta shift toward a higher number, and Dire Feudal cannot guard any number beyond 50k consistently yet. So if the deck can do that afterwards, I would say it's a huge dub for Dire Feudals. And then we move into Vanguard, and I noticed I put Basen between Vanguard. I feel dumb, but let's move on. Gravidia gets a little bit of a bump from me, from low B tier from the previous tier list into, you know what, above Gryandra. So it's still like B tier but better. The reason why I'm saying this is because that is how good the brand new Gravidia card really helps both versions of the deck. Like, this brand new support allow itself to gain more power, which means that it is a prime target for Gravidia Mask skill, on top of the fact that it can self-recycle itself back from your drop. This card frustrates me quite a bit because this could have been what Gravidia could have gotten in DZBT01, and it would make Gravidia at least have a little bit more time to shine before completely dim out. But overall, it is still an improvement, so I'm gonna put it above Gryandra. So yeah, Gravidia, just like any other side character deck, got screwed over into oblivion by Bushiroad, and unfortunately can no longer get its former glory. And then we have Vanguard, which I feel the new support helps the deck, but very tiny bit. It's like you put in a brand new flush in your nuts, so that like it has a better spacing than the old one, which is about to break. And that is actually, that's a great analogy. What the fuck? Shut up. Like, being a last substitute which can be discarded is actually great, but it doesn't improve the deck by a lot. Because of that, he get a downgrade to low A tier. Like, if it has not been obvious already, a lot of boss unit that does need a personal right to get additional effect has been losing a lot of relevancy, and for a good reason. Like, you need one specific mechanic to trigger for you to get additional advantage, and Vanguard, I would say, is unfortunately one of the worst victims of this restriction. Yes, you technically can get away with it by using Rector, but the fact that you still need your Vanguard to hit during the turn you don't personal right still hurts the deck a little bit too much, even if Blanket have a solution for Vanguard. But yeah, overall, quite lukewarm support for Blanket decks in general, except for one particular archetype. But how good is Keter? Does reviving Gogabiel into the energy form for Bastion actually do it for the deck? Unfortunately, no.
Emotional damage!
Yes, Bastion shield did get better because of the new Gogabiel, but that is pretty much it. The shield value of the deck is still not high enough to handle against a brand new type of meta in the current format, and that is less attack but really fat number. So because of that, I'm putting Bastion down to about chaos level, I guess. Like, this deck needs a little bit of high roll for them to secure a win, and I feel this makes the most sense. Same goes for Hexa Orb, which
hurts
my heart to rate it into low A as well. Like, the deck still works. The new support helps you to fix that persona's consistency issue, especially it does able to search in the earlier part of the game as well. But this is purely based on my gut feeling here, but I feel there is a potential to tap into 4 Hexa Orb that improve the way the deck flows, at least in the earlier part of the game. That might shift the ranking up, which still requires some testing. But despite that, I do still feel its weakness still stand out, in a sense that without trigger, the deck kind of screwed, and if you did not pull any card that help you to get through that quickly enough, it's also screwed. But that's just my theory for now. I might have to go back and test a little bit more before I can give a concrete result. Let's move on to the next nation, Stoicheia. And we have the second deck that I think some of you guys might be against this, but I feel it's a right unit to be put into S tier, Lianorn. Yes, this might be biased towards the fact that the WGP that I went did have multiple Lianorns in the tournament, and 2 of them managed to top 2, but I feel that just is a testament to how strong the new Lianorn support really becomes. The deck essentially got an improvement version of Broccoli, while still can run Broccoli. So the deck has a much better shield value, much better searchability, much better draw power, much better aggro. Because of all these elements, Lianorn is able to shine, and she really shine as she adapt extremely well into the Wine's meta. And then we have Magnolia. Yeah, this feels right. Magnolia is one of those decks where it gets way too much support, and despite all that new support, it wasn't able to win consistently. Though I have to say the new support, the Lilikoi, is a great card for the deck, and the Sonic is...
I'm a New York 5.
It's just that the amount of shield that it's capable of guarding right now, it's just not high enough to guard against the current meta. Like, I know I'm talking about power a lot here, but that is where I feel the meta has been shifting towards, and most of the overdressed deck is not able to handle that higher power as we're going into later part of the game, later part of the match. So if you are able to tank yourself well, you are getting an improvement. Simple as that. And then we have Flamji, and this and Petroga will be one of the few decks that I'm gonna call a tentative ranking, because they are getting additional support in DZBT05 as well, and I feel it is more fair to judge them properly once they have all the support. But Femgram support is good enough to get her a bump up to low A tier. The reason behind I'm saying this is because the original Femgram problem was it's able to guarantee 1 Femgram on the board only. Now you have a way to guarantee both Femgram on the board even if you are not able to get additional copy of Femgram unit in your hand. Fortunately enough, Femgram will get more support, including a brand new Femgram in DZBT05, so her final ranking might be higher than some of people think it will be. So just keep that in mind. The same goes for Petroga as well. Petroga is one of those decks where I don't have enough knowledge yet, but because the deck getting a number of significant support, and based on what I read, it is significant enough to help the deck. So I'm gonna put her into low B tier as a tentative ranking, and I will give you guys more clearer explanation in the next tier list when I finally tested Petroga properly. The annoying thing about DZBT04 is that a lot of the decks that did did get a support in the DZBT04, also get the additional support in DZBT05, including the new forms. So some of these entry won't be like a complete ranking of it, and for that I apologize for that. And then we have Pacifica, which I tried to like her, I try to make her works, but I'm sorry guys, see it here. She needs a brand new Pacifica to really works, and the pusher is still not giving her that. So until she get a new Pacifica, I feel like C is a right place for her, at least in my opinion, cause I break so many times with her if I don't have additional Pacifica. That is how terrible of a flaw this deck can get. And finally, after roughly half an hour of talking about other decks that some people may not care about, we finally talk about entries that I think many of you guys actually care for: the Fated ones, the Destined one, and the brand new Sprite decks. And I think we can start off with the biggest L taker among the Fated one, Rosario. Rosario only received one main support, and that is Catullus, which is a decent back row interceptor that can boost when called by Rosario. And that's a problem. It has to be called by Rosario, sacrificing one of the very precious slots that you can use to revive other things like Zerugaon, Nebulus, or even Nobia. Like essentially, calling 2 is no longer enough for the deck. And Catullus doesn't bring enough profit for that. Yes, Rosario do still have some of the more well-known playstyle like hostage playstyle with the set order, which allow him to essentially PG multiple times within a single turn if needed to. But I have to say it is not effective enough, especially considering we have a better user of the hostage playstyle right now, and unfortunately has to drop off A+ tier into between high A tier and mid A tier. There's still a lot of decks in my A tiers, huh? Regardless, he's not losing much to be fair, because most of his main support is most likely in DZBT05 with his brand new form, Vita. But to balance everything out, let's talk about the deck that actually has gotten the biggest dub among the Fated one, Baromagnes. And Baromagnes is, in my opinion, one of the best deck in the format right now, and he goes straight into high A+ tier. And it's all because of Vedyrock. Vedyrock not only helped to build the board for Baromagnes, which is something the deck lacked to an extent, but also has ability to get a huge number very passively and doesn't care which row you are at, allowing you to essentially use it as a booster together with what is, in my opinion, one of the more recent favorite cards in terms of arts for Dark State, and that is Game of Underworld. This fixes the issue of only Vanguard has a huge number for Baromagnes, and the deck fall off after Divine Skill. Like, the deck still fall off after the Divine Skill, but because of how high Vedyrock can hit, it doesn't matter. And let's be real here, the fact that you can just go VIP mode and say Yami no game hajimeyo in the match is the coolest feeling. And the funny part is that it is a legitimate combo that actually push Baromagnes back into A+ tier, and based on many of the players' opinion, it's gonna stay there for a while this time. And the same goes for Varga actually. Like, Varga get a filter that is a little bit awkward to play because of the energy blast part of it. I already talked about him in one of my videos, and the deck still kind of missing some counter charge. I know Dragon Empire in general has a few counter charger that works with this deck, but I feel you rather run the card that help you to cycle the deck quicker, aka more draws, than running card that help you to counter charge. But this is still a Overlord deck, and as one of the best Overlord deck in a format right now, things can snowball very quickly if you manage to high roll just even a little bit. So because of that, I would still consider Varga one of the better deck in the format, right behind Baromagnes. And the dub trend doesn't stop here, as we have Belstra with Fenlicta and the PR, two of the cards that, in my opinion, has complete the puzzle that is Belstra. Now the deck has a way to refund the discard card cost for multiple units in your deck, namely Divine Ubers and Freiheits. But unfortunately for Belstra, he get way too frustrated with him not getting top way too many times. He hired a help, a Demonite help. black. Yes, in the manga, black is actually a devil. So Velstra player has to face these two particular choices. Do you want to go with 6 attack regardless of whether you're going first or second while still retain all the product capability, or you get ability to search for multiple product in a single turn and help you to set up very quickly, but you have to wait until turn 4 to actually start pressuring with damage dealing and power minusing. We all know which one player ultimately chose. So because of that, and in the respect of him getting better every time he get a support, I'm gonna put Velstra in the peak of A tier, and he will stay there for the entirety of this tier list video. Velstra, you have done well, but you shouldn't have signed the Devil's contract. And then we have Zorga, which I will put him like happily in high A. The new support really gives him a much easier way to access to order, but based on some of the Zorga player I have talked to, they say it's just simply optional, which sounds crazy to me as well, because guaranteeing an order to use every turn is a huge deal, because one of the problem I run into every time I play my own version of a Zorga is always the consistency of being able to play the order, and that card solved the issue. But I'm not putting Zorga in high A because of the support, but rather his compatibility against the decks in the current meta, because there are just way too many decks that can do early game more consistently and way better than Zorga, who do need a little bit of proper setup to get all the pieces done right. Essentially, a lot of decks are able to push Zorga before Zorga can push them back, and by the time Zorga can do so, most of the time they are able to live through at least 1 to 2 Zorga turns before they can go in for the kill. And that is why I'm demoting Zorga. He was put into a slightly disadvantageous position ever since the DZBT04, but that's just how I think. And we have the last member of the Fated One, at least the present version, and that is Chris Rain. And this entry is a very interesting one. Initially, I thought Rochelle, the brand new support, is not good because it's another card that clocked into the energy pool that Chris Rain normally has. But after talking and playing against multiple Chris Rain players, I can safely say it is good enough to bump Chris Rain up into low A tier. I know I'm clocking my A tier list again, but what else I can do? There are that many decks that are in this stage. Chris Rain is low-key a dark horse deck, because what I did not consider is that one restand is enough because of how high Chris Rain number can get already. So the fact that now the deck has a more consistent way of getting 4 attacks is a great thing in itself, even if the card has just one use and eat into the energy counter pool.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Okay, so now that I have talked about the Fated ones, are the Destined one destined for greatness? Well, we are starting off unfortunately with the one that I feel start off kinda lukewarm, and that is Levidras. And this will come as a surprise for a lot of people. I feel at the moment he is a high B tier deck. The reason why I'm saying Levidras in particular is because of the fact that, for one, he's most likely getting a new form. I mean, by the time I release this video, most likely we got a confirmation of his new form, maybe. But regardless, the problem with Levidras is that it has to go second. And I feel when the deck has to go a certain order and doesn't give enough of a payoff at the stride deck, it is missing something. Like, genuinely, I feel Levidras on launch just feels like it missed something, even if it was able to top, which is actually surprising thing. But I feel in general, Levidras is just a B tier deck for me at the moment. And if they have a way to accelerate markers for Levidras, regardless of they are going first or second, I would say the deck would immediately jump to high A or even A+ tier. Next up, we have a deck that is kind of equivalent to Velstra in a way, at least among the Destined one, and that is El Quiribra. Some people might disagree with this statement on this, but I feel, yeah, El Quiribra is strong, but slightly stronger than my goal. El Quiribra has a lot of good things going for him. The deck can rush, the deck has a really good draw engine, the deck can get a huge number out of nowhere, and most importantly, as much as the divine skill is kind of mid, it worked well just enough to pressure for El Quiribra to use it as a way to pressure opponent. The problem with El Quiribra, in my opinion, is the fact that he is heavily reliant on the rear guard, particularly overcharged rear guard. Yes, the deck is more or less able to revive the boss board very quickly, but the moment you do not have enough overcharge regard to actually take advantage of, you are significantly holded back. And similar to Blackmire, Elkribra can only go full power once per game, you know, 5k the whole board and everything. So to me, that is a huge flaw, even if the amount of pressure you can exert from that divine skill is good. And that's why I'm putting Elkribra only at high A. It is good. It is still missing a few pieces of jigsaw puzzle to make things better, and fortunately enough, we are getting a bunch of it. Then we have Alden. And in the previous tier list, I say Rorowa was king of aggro, right? But if you ask me who is the king of rush in A tier right now, it's easily Alden, which I will put him behind Michael. The thing about Alden is that it's in a similar situation with Elkribra where you have to draw into the right key pieces. And for Alden, I think the way his deck works, it just rushed too well. The only drawback I would say with him is just that if there is a way for him to buff his Vanguard attack again, that would be great. And maybe another card that has a similar trigger condition as Rational, cause relying on just one card on being called over, it just
Not good enough!
And then we have my new favorite Lyrical deck actually, and that is Licia File. In context of the current meta, if you ignore every other nation like Lyrical Cup, Licia is one of the best deck in the format right now aside Kyoga and Miju. Because of that, I have to put her in front of Kyoga. And with that in mind, I'm gonna shift a few decks that I think is better than Licia a bit more forward, like this two. Licia File, in my opinion, is essentially an LB that needs a little bit of high roll and border power. Like Licia File, when you build her well, she just goes off really hard. And this is mainly because of the fact that without those expensive generics, she have an extra amount, so that goes unused if you're not using any of the generics. On top of the fact that those generics also help to build the board to prevent the deck from overcommitting their hand and, you know, deck thinning for the triggers. But yeah, that's where I feel Licia File is at the moment, because it is a strong deck, but it is not strong enough to overcome the top tier decks right now. Because the best Destined one out of the gate for me is Impaudio, right behind Waga. This is one of the representative of this meta. The 3 attack deck that hits so ridiculously high that it's hard for opponent to guard properly. And Impaudio does it extremely well because of the additional drive that he can get from Winster and from his divine skill, and his set order token allow you to get a bit more defensive, countering some of the aggro deck in the format right now. The only drawback with Impaudio, in my opinion, is that if you filter him poorly, he kind of screwed. Like, he has a good defense, but you have to draw into those cards. He has a good offense, but you have to draw into those cards as well. Yes, he does have a bit of a filter skill, but currently the only filter in his deck is Balderit and him, which is a little bit limited. So if he gets more filter, things might change. And no, that card is kind of sucks to use. And then we move to the last part of this video, the strike decks. How good is Hari and Night Rose? If you follow the meta very closely, it is very clear. The last entry to S tier is Night Rose, and she is at the top. And the reason why I make this statement is because the deck is like Chrono Jet, but power based. The deck has a great grade 1 engine that does allow you to set up your drop and give you enough draw to actually last into your first strike or playing a grade 2 game. And in all fairness, as long as you can get all the pieces right and you manage to strike on turn 3, you are more or less will be able to win due to how ridiculously high her number can get, especially in the late part of the game.
Genuinely disgusting.
I'm not saying she's perfect, as if she forced to go first and the deck she was up against pushed her hard enough, like Shoujo-Roji, she definitely suffer. So this is one of the interesting cases where despite she being one of the best decks, she is also one of those decks where she is the most easy to counter among the 3 different era of strike tops. And to be fair, Shiranui is still one of the more legitimate top decks in general. Do I think is there anything in Night Rose roster that need to be hit? Definitely. I personally feel there's a few cards that need to be hit, but that is for another video. As we have to talk about the last deck, Hari. And Hari, in my honest, genuine opinion, is above Licia File, and I'll shift Kyoga a little bit back like this. Hari, in my opinion, is a deck of key pieces, and the deck is capable of searching all the key pieces very well. But if you fail to do so, you are in general got holded back by a lot. And I would say among all the stride deck in the format right now, Hari is the worst victim to get grade 2 games. Like Messiah did get a support that does allow him to play turn 3 a little bit better, and so does Chiranui, Nairos, Luat, and Jet. Hari doesn't have one yet. And no, that engine doesn't really work because Hari don't really control that much. But this doesn't mean that Hari early game is bad. The early game for Hari is okay, but the moment you start going into the grade 2 games, the deck start to suffer. And if you consider the whole package of a stride deck as a whole, Hari is definitely the weakest right now, and he wouldn't have been this weak if BANCHOU did not undertune Hari. But that's just my thoughts about it, and that is my tier list for DZBT04 and stride deck set. And I'll repeat this point again, and also thank you for those who managed to watch the whole video. Most of the decks are at the stage where it is almost complete. So if the deck have reached that state, I consider it to be A tier, because if we are giving any more support to the thing, it would either be way too broken or the support actually hold the deck down. Case in point, Gravidia. But what do you guys think? Do leave down in the comments below, and yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to clap that sub and join membership for some cool perks. And this is Mac Mechanic. See you guys at the last tier list video I'm gonna make for the year.